What's going on? How are you today? We're going to talk about the real food pyramid for 93% of US adults. As you can see on the screen here, I'm going to maximize this image so that you can see the very foods that you should be eating if you are living in North America. This is a really interesting image here showing a food pyramid that can help support metabolic health, which is a problem for about 93% of US adults. I'm going to wait for some of y'all to get on here. Happy Cinco de Mayo. I don't expect too many of the high intensity health viewers to be at the bar right now. And if you are at the bar, eating tacos, drinking tequila, hats off to you for hopping on. But we are going to talk about the foods that you should be eating, drawing upon information from a paper titled Myths and Facts Regarding Low Carbohydrate Diets. And we're going to focus on this new food pyramid that has been proposed by our friend Nina Teicholz and colleagues. Okay, so here we go. Let's get right into it, not waste any time here. If you're enjoying the content, you know what to do. Please hit that like button. Be sure to share this live video with a friend if you do enjoy it. And let's get into it. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today, my friends, is the really interesting idea that far too many people are consuming carbohydrates. Now, excessive amounts of highly processed, ultra-processed carbohydrates that cause many metabolic and health issues. So we're drawing upon this paper right here titled Myths and Facts Regarding Low Carbohydrate Diets. Now, I think this is really interesting for a lot of different reasons, but we're going to really dive into this today. Okay, so here we go. Now, I want to get to the image here because that's what you want to know. You want to know what to eat. This is what so many of you are concerned and have questions about. Now, when you look at this particular food pyramid for people with metabolic disease, and we're going to talk about some of the limitations. A lot of people think, well, if I have meat and animal-based foods and animal source foods like yogurt and eggs in the sort, well, that can cause my LDL cholesterol to go up, and that can cause all these problems. But research actually shows that individuals thrive on high protein diets and even animal source fats. And you can do this on a plant-based diet as well, or having more plant-sourced fatty foods. Okay, so let's really get into this paper. Okay, the prevalence of chronic diseases continue to rise, with 93% of US adults having risk factors or taking medications for obesity, diabetes, and heart disease, according to a recent estimate. This public health emergency requires doctors and other experts to remain open-minded about new evidence-based practices to these stubborn epidemics. Low carbohydrate diets have been studied for nearly 3 decades, with papers on clinical trials now numbering in the thousands. These trials have demonstrated significant benefits for the prevention and treatment of obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease, hypertension, and mental health disorders. Now, here's what's really interesting. The American Diabetes Association, Diabetes Canada, the European Association for Study of Diabetes, the Australian Diabetes Association. All right, can you guys see that now? Okay. And the ADA supported consensus report now recognize low carbohydrate eating patterns as being acceptable for managing type 2 diabetes, which is incredibly fascinating. Something I do just want to mention, where did my face go? Yeah, I'm not sure what happened with my connection with the camera. So what I am going to do is show my FaceTime camera right here. The audio, the video just got really, really bright because of my room here. Okay, so here we go, friends. We are continuing to talk more about this paper. All right, so there I am on the screen. You can see me right on the lower part of your screen now. I'm sorry, I had to update and modify the camera. Okay, so let's continue on and talk about some of the limitations here. I think this is really important for folks to understand the research on low carb diets and the idea that having fatty foods is somehow unhealthy and problematic is not really corroborated by the evidence. But what is a low carbohydrate diet? This is something really that we should be talking about here. I think this is interesting. So a ketogenic diet would be less than between 20 and 50 grams of carbohydrates per day, whereas a low carbohydrate diet would be less than 130 grams of carbohydrates per day, which is where most of you should be aiming for in terms of your carbohydrate intake. Because of course, many people are not athletic enough to justify consuming more than 130 grams of carbohydrates per day. Okay, so here's the foods that we're going to focus on in today's session. As you can see here on the bottom, we have whole fat dairy, we have animal sourced proteins, fats, and oils. Okay, really simple. Remember the food pyramid in the 90s? You know, the bottom of the food pyramid was grains, was pasta, bread, bagels, rice, starches. And what happened over the past 30 years? We have seen obesity rates skyrocket. We have seen metabolic disease rates skyrocket, autism rates, so many challenges with metabolic disorders now because many people have been over consuming, namely ultra processed carbohydrates and sugars and so forth. And so this is really what we should focus on, friends. And the bottom part of this pyramid is really, for most of my clients that I work with, where I encourage them to spend the most time from a nutrition standpoint. Having eggs for breakfast with some avocado, for example, or having full fat dairy for breakfast, raw milk, raw yogurt, these things. For lunch, having fish or red meat. These things are what folks eat all throughout the world. Yet we have been told here in America that if we consume these foods, they're going to raise our LDL cholesterol, that's going to cause atherosclerotic plaque, and we're going to, develop cancer and all these this crazy nonsense. But it's really important that we understand that when we eat these animal source foods and focus on consuming high quality proteins, which are much more satiating, much more filling, and far less likely to be overconsumed, that is going to support our metabolic health and reduce the prevalence of metabolic health related conditions. Okay, so what we want to focus then is on the top. The carbohydrate sourced foods really depend upon your activity level. So if you're very physically active, you're going to CrossFit, you're running, you're cycling, you're lifting weights like we recommend 3 to 4 days per week, then of course you can afford more starchy type foods and fruits and things like that. But you really want to tailor your carbohydrates based upon your activity level. And so as this recommendation suggests, most people should be consuming a relatively low carbohydrate diet, less than 100 grams of carbs per day. Now, what are some of the shortcomings and limitations here? Because people say, well, gosh, doesn't the brain need a lot of carbohydrates to function? Well, this is really interesting. They talk about that in this paper, that the amount of carbohydrates that your brain needs is essentially zero because your body has various ways and mechanisms to increase blood glucose through a process known as gluconeogenesis. So they go on to say, there are no deficiency symptoms that occur even in the complete absence of dietary carbohydrates. The small amount of glucose needed for the functioning of the brain, red blood cells, and the eyes can be created either by using substrates via a process known as gluconeogenesis. Okay, what about heart disease, right? The widely held belief that saturated fats, and do you like when I kind of highlight stuff? Let me know in the comment section below, my friends. Andrea says, how is 130 grams considered low? Yeah, well, that's a really good question, Andrea. For most people, this is low considering the fact that most people consume far more than 130 grams of carbohydrates per day. But again, friends, if you're enjoying the content, hit that like button. Thank you for being here. My real good camera is having some issues right now with all the light that is coming in. Summer is hitting us here in Seattle. So we're going to continue on with my FaceTime camera. Grateful that you're all here. Now, for those of you that are concerned about saturated fat, let me know what you think about this. The belief that saturated fats increase heart disease risk has been challenged. In the context of lower carbohydrate intake, several studies have shown that increased saturated fat consumption by 2 to 3-fold either has no effect or decreases the abundance of saturated fatty acids in the blood. Furthermore, a 2020 state-of-the-art review of saturated fat in the authoritative Journal of the American College of Cardiology found no beneficial effects of reducing saturated fat intake on cardiovascular disease risk and total mortality. Right here, boom. I'm going to highlight this. You got, oh, shoot. Where'd that go? Oh my goodness. Okay. Basically, little to no beneficial effects of reducing saturated fat on cardiovascular related events. These findings have been confirmed in nearly 24 systematic reviews and meta-analyses of large clinical trials. For patients who prefer not to eat animal fats, they should know that a low carbohydrate diet with plant-based fats is possible. Let's talk about LDL. Okay. A related concern is the rise in LDL cholesterol, often seen in low carbohydrate diets. However, a recent meta-analysis of 41 low carbohydrate diet trials found that mostly lean people with a BMI less than 25 see this type of cholesterol rise. Even the increase in this group may not signify an increased risk of heart disease, since a recent study in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology, I think is the journal, Advances found that these lean outliers with high LDL cholesterol had no significant plaque buildup after 4.7 years compared to a matched control group. Now, we've reviewed that study recently as well. This study suggests that elevated LDL cholesterol on low-carb diets is not meaningful for observable heart disease. By contrast, a substantial body of published work over the past 20 years has documented that low carbohydrate diets induce favorable changes in many cardiovascular risk factors, including high triglycerides, low HDL cholesterol, increased small, dense LDL particles, high blood sugar, hyperinsulinemia, hypertension, and chronic inflammation, in addition to reduced stroke risk. A large clinical trial on the ketogenic diet for 1 year found that of the 20 heart disease risk factors measured, 17 showed significant improvements while 2 remained unchanged. We actually should review this paper. Fascinating stuff right here. Friends, are you enjoying this content? Yeah, that's you. Are you? If you are, hit the like button. That's why I know that we should continue to do these sessions. We have 57 likes. That's awesome. Keep hitting that like button, and we'll keep doing these sessions on Monday. Okay. LDL cholesterol was the sole risk factor that worsened overall. The 10-year atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease risk factor score for these subjects decreased by 11.9%. In another small window carbohydrate intervention that did not restrict saturated fat intake, the 10-year cardiovascular risk was reduced by 44%. Altogether, these improvements can be seen as compensating for any potentially concerning rise in LDL cholesterol. The higher red meat consumption common to low carbohydrate diets is also thought to cause both heart disease and cancer. However, the most rigorous comprehensive review on the data on red meat using a gold standard methodology called the grading of recommendations, assessment, development, and evaluation concluded that there is very little high-quality evidence to justify any health concerns about red meat. These reviews found that the available evidence is of low to very low certainty for health outcomes, including heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and cancer of any kind. In other words, the best available evaluation of the existing evidence does not support concerns that red meat causes these diseases. New headlines and many studies reporting contrary information are based almost exclusively on low-quality evidence from observational or mechanistic studies rather than high-quality evidence from clinical trials on red meat or processed meat. Really important. Okay, thanks for the highlighting information. Let's talk about diabetes, because that's what we care about. 93% of U.S. adults have some degree of insulin resistance. This is profound. This is rampant. And it's the very insulin resistance that causes or initiates the atherosclerotic plaque in the coronary arteries, in the carotid arteries, in the cerebral arteries. We should care about insulin resistance. Well, what is a tool that we can all benefit from in terms of improving insulin resistance? Well, it's this very food pyramid that we've been talking about here, my friends. A low carb style diet focusing on animal source proteins, yogurt, full fat dairy, red meat, eggs, raw cheese, raw dairy, fermented foods, grain products that do not trash your gastrointestinal tract. That's what we should be focusing on. That's why we're here, my friends. And if you agree with that message, I appreciate your likes, your comments, your shares. I would love to know where you're from. Why aren't you at the bar? Come on, it's Cinco de Mayo. You should be drinking. I'm kidding. What are you all doing for Cinco de Mayo? I'm getting back from Boise. I was at a conference this past weekend where we talked a lot about immunometabolism. If you want to learn more about that, let me know in the comment section below. I can share that video with you. But just grateful that you're here. Hit that like button if you're enjoying the content. We're going to continue on. Okay, Lorraine says, and red meat is high in B vitamins. Red meat's also high, Lorraine, as you know, in conditionally essential nutrients like carnitine, like creatine, like zinc. Okay. Thank you for that, Lorraine. Adrian is a lean mass hyperresponder, and she has an appointment with a cardiologist to see if she has any plaque buildup causing because of her high LDL cholesterol. Adrian, let us know next Monday or the following Monday if there is any plaque buildup from your high LDL cholesterol. We would like to know, has anyone here watching now or watching this replay had their coronary artery plaque assessed? I would love to know that. Darren is a truck driver from Chicago, and tomorrow he's going to deliver in Tampa. Damn, Darren, you're driving from Chicago to Tampa? That's pretty badass. That's a long way. Darren, good for you. I'm glad you're listening to helpful content. Cheers to Darren for listening to health promoting information while he's driving. Darren, one thing you can do and one thing all of y'all can do when you're driving to help to offset some of the problems that is associated with driving for extended periods of time is to go out and actually stop and, every 90 minutes and move your legs while you're driving. Try to move your muscles. Really important, Darren, to stay active as much as you can, even while you're driving. Okay. Very interesting stuff. Let's talk about how low carb diets can help with diabetes, with type 2 diabetes. While clinicians commonly believe type 2 diabetes is an irreversible condition, the American Diabetes Association has established that remission of this disease is possible and that reducing carbohydrate intake has the most evidence for glycemic control. A clinical trial on 238 participants with type 2 diabetes for a mean of 8 years found that more than 50% reversed this disease on a ketogenic diet, with most reducing or eliminating medications in just 10 weeks. 93% of U.S. adults have some degree of insulin resistance. They're on the trajectory of developing type 2 diabetes, yet we have a low-carb diet that improved more than 50% of these individuals, reducing medication dependency and more. These results were sustained for the 2-year duration of the trial. An audit of the primary care practice in England also found more than 50% remission for 186 patients who chose a ketogenic diet. Okay, the use of medication to treat type 2 diabetes is often thought to be a preferable strategy to diet. However, many medications, including insulin, sulfonylureas, and thiazolidinediones, often lead to weight gain and disease progression, with very few patients experiencing remission. While GLP-1 agonists may be helpful, these are associated with serious side effects, including gastroparesis, pancreatitis, and other studies have found to have a high discontinuation rate. All right, so we know now that having high-fat foods doesn't cause heart disease or increase your risk of a heart attack. We know that if you're metabolically healthy, if your LDL is high, that is not statistically significantly associated with arterial plaque formation. And we now know that low-carb diets are beneficial for metabolic health. So let's summarize what we can do here. Conclusions from this paper. Again, we're talking about the new food pyramid for individuals with poor metabolic health issues, which is 93% of US adults. Insane. This is insane. Now, we're going to continue on to talk about these factors, my friends, but I just want to give you a small little reminder that berberine hydrochloride is one of the most effective natural products to support metabolic health. Did you know that berberine has been used for 3,000 years to help support metabolic health, improving waist to hip ratio, body composition, improving blood lipid levels, and supporting overall metabolic health? You can check out the many reviews on the berberine fasting accelerator by Myoscience. What's unique about this formulation is it's featuring the Hemaberb, highly purified carbon-14 tested form of berberine hydrochloride. There's close to 400 reviews from people just like you. So you can click the link in the description below to learn a little bit more about this. This is an awesome formulation that has been shown by many customers to help support metabolic health. So definitely check that out. Okay. So as we go on to talk about this new food pyramid, let's talk about the conclusions. The low carbohydrate or ketogenic diet is supported by a large body of clinical trial research demonstrating its safety and efficacy. Commonly held concerns, such as the idea that low carbohydrate diets increase mortality or increases the risk of heart disease, are not supported by the evidence. There are no harmful side effects of low carbohydrate diets. Your brain does not need some 100 grams of carbs per day. The net requirement for your brain in terms of carbohydrates is 0. Your body can make carbohydrates from a lot of other, macronutrient cofactors, such as fats and different amino acids. Okay. The so-called keto flu that some people experience on a low-carb diet can easily be treated and is easily avoided with electrolytes with proper hydration. Low carbohydrate diets can be sustainable and are nutritionally complete. Okay. So let's get to some questions, shall we? Shall we get to some questions? All right. Let's get over here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make my video screen a little bit bigger so you can see everything that we're talking about here. Okay. Okay, let's continue on, my friends. All right. So I'm going to get to your questions right here. How we doing? We're up close and personal. My other camera is having some challenges, so that is what we're doing here. Okay. So we got the food pyramid right here. We got many of you on. Let's get to your questions. Thank you for being here. All right, Eddie Carlson says, movement snacks. Yes, amazing. I love exercise snacks. Rick is saying, hi from Canada. Hey, Rick, thanks for being here. Kimberly says, adjusting to life, becoming an empty nester. Won't talk about my diet. Yeah, I fear the day where I will be an empty nester in 5 years. It's a scary thought. Kids are amazing. If you have the ability to have children, please do so. Eddie says, what about wearing pure gold? Not sure about that. Rick says, I have been trying to get a heart attack from the carnivore diet since 1983. Wow, you've been doing this for 34 years. Fantastic. 42 years. Amazing. Okay. Darren is a truck driver driving from Chicago to Tampa. He says, I get out every 2 hours and go for a walk. That's awesome. Kimberly's from North Texas. Amazing. Rick says, with regards to driving, Rick says, what about if you have a manual transmission? Yeah, stick shifts are awesome. They are awesome. Okay. All right. Bruce, it's 10:50 a.m. down here in Australia. A bit early for drinking. Yes, that is. All right. Well, friends, I very much appreciate you all tuning in. This is the new food pyramid that has been proposed by Nina Teicholz et al. Really interesting stuff that we've been talking about here. Fascinating paper that many of you should consider reading. This is the paper right here, Myths and Facts Regarding a Low Carbohydrate Diet. I'm grateful that you all tuned in. Sorry for the camera issues. Hopefully you have a great rest of your day, great evening. Happy Cinco de Mayo to you. Appreciate you tuning in, and we'll catch you on a future video down the road.